And for those of you who are watching at home, thank you for coming on and showing your interest in hearing more about the UniSA online representative election that we're having at USASA. And before we begin as well, I'd also like to acknowledge that the land that we meet on today is of the First Nations people of Australia. I am coming from Dana land at the moment, but I'm sure that there'll be people watching this on all different parts of Australia, or of the First Nations country, and I recognise elders past, present and emerging. This always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Okay, beautiful. So tonight we are going to go over a couple of things to give you guys a better background about USASA, the purpose of this role and the election, and how it's going to work as well. So first of all, I'm going to get started by just saying, what is USASA? Because this may be the first time that some of you are hearing about us as an organisation and what we do and what our role is for students at UniSA. So we are the student association, the UniSA Student Association. The purpose of USASA is to provide services and support for students of UniSA. And as you can see on the screen, our mission is to empower students to shape their own university journey. So this is an ethos that was developed by past boards during a strategic planning process, and soon will be developed for next year. So the person who is the lucky candidate who comes on is successfully elected, you will get to be part of a new strategic planning process as well, which is a really great experience for anyone involved in that kind of thing. So essentially we are a non-for-profit organisation that sits separate to the university, but provides services specifically for UniSA students. So there are some benefits to being separate from the uni, and that is that it means that it can be run by students for students, which is what the board itself does. They are the custodians, the trustees, the management committee of this incorporated association. And I'll explain a little bit more about what that means. But basically USASA, we provide these services for students. You may be familiar with some of these if you've had a look at the website or seen them. Most of these are definitely available to online students, particularly advocacy, financial counselling and grants, I think are the ones that are the most easily transferable across there. But we definitely are moving more towards this generally for providing services that can support online students. And hopefully the person who's elected to this role will have a bit of a say and a bit of a part in how we do that as well. It's important though that we do talk about that it is an incorporated association that has members, because the purpose of this election is for a segment of the members of the organisation, UniSA students, to vote on who's going to be the board of directors. And that's basically what this is. But being a board of directors also means that there are some more stricter governance requirements around this election. And I will explain those as we go through. But for anyone who was already wondering about why the eligibility criteria is so strict, for example, there are good reasons for that I will go into. So beautiful. So this is basically how USASA operates. And this is quite similar to most nonprofits and organisations that are quite similar. So if you can see my cursor on the screen, hopefully nod. Yeah, you can. Cool. Sorry, I'm not really very good at how these screen sharing works, but beautiful. So this is the board here, and they have one employee, and that's the CEO. The CEO then has employees, which is the staff who provide the services that were on the previous slide. One of those services is supporting the board, and that is me and my role. When I'm not running elections, I am heavily involved in helping support the board in carrying out their processes and their projects and the things that's important to the board reps. The board is also supported by a finance advisor and a legal advisor, which is to help with understanding the fact that you guys may have no experience being in this position before, but we don't want that to be a barrier to getting involved, because this is also seen very much as an educated experience, and there is actually a lot to gain from being on a board that isn't just more than what the role is itself. So that's just a bit of background on how it works. And primarily what's important is that the board is a decision maker. They make the peak decisions for the organisation that steer that really big picture, high level stuff that steers the way that we do our operations below that and provide our services. So this is just basically a summary of what boards do in general and what the purpose of the board is. And I'll then go into what the board reps as individuals will do as we move into that section. But yes, as a general group and as a collective, this is what boards do. So the board is then made up of a range of people. So there's 15 student reps, including the new UniSA online rep. And that is because, as you can see, this is all very campus-based, who these positions on the board are. So apart from the 4 positions up here that will represent students from all campuses, primarily the composition of the board is made up with people from specific campuses to have that, what's the word, like diversity in opinion and in perspective. And also to make sure that, you know, the things unique to those campuses are represented. And that's what brings UniSA Online into the board now, is that it has been recognised as a campus according to what the definition of campus is in USASA's constitution. So if it does seem a little strange that we're having this halfway through the year, it's because we only have really come to that realisation quite recently that we didn't need to do constitutional review to have the change at this point in time, that in fact should already be recognised as a campus. So that's where this is coming from. These people over here on the board are people who do not have voting rights. They are there to support. Actually, hang on, I should have removed this. The observer from UniSA, that's a little bit misleading. They're not actually members of the board. They're just present at board meetings. Sorry, I should have removed this after I noticed it last night. But yeah, just ignore that observer from UniSA line. It's actually the legal advisor, finance advisor, and CEO. But we do have people from the university that attend meetings and provide some context and support as well. So that's what the board does as a collective and what the purpose of USASA is overall. Do you have any questions before I move on from that, or around that stuff specifically, or are you happy for me to keep powering through?
Yeah, I'm happy for you to keep going.
Beautiful. All right. So in terms of what board members do individually and what that actually means, is I'll go through the president first, because they actually do have a slightly different role to the rest of the board members, in the sense that their role is being on the board but then on steroids. They have quite a lot more responsibilities and expectations from both the university and from students and USASA in general. So the president gets elected directly, which I guess is part of this reason as well. They knew what they were getting themselves in for before they put their name on the ballot. And they have these responsibilities. So in addition to being a decision maker on specific committees, they also will be the media spokesperson for USASA and do that. And maybe you've seen the president of USASA in either some of our press releases or in some of our copy. We have the same president this year that we had last year, so they've had a couple of years to build their profile, I suppose, of being in that role. You can see there as well that all the other board members, it really is a mixture between trying to understand what students want from their cohorts and what they need, and also making decisions, because ultimately the board is a decision-making board. That is its main role. And these additional representative functions are something that are by nature of the context in which our board operates in, essentially. But it's primarily decision maker with some of these other functions as well. So there are committees of the USASA, subcommittees of the USASA board that are run by other board members and have membership from the wider student body or from other members of the board. And that's essentially where a lot of the board's business gets done. So there are 5 committees at the moment. I've only listed 3 there, but that's one example. In terms of monthly activity reports, that again is something that gets done to ensure that students know what's going on, and also gives people an opportunity to let the reps know if there's anything on their campuses, et cetera, that they need to know. And those get published monthly online. So if you're interested, feel free to go and have a look at what the board members do month to month, because they do have a blog. And I think we've got blogs on there from all board reps for the past 5 or 6 years. So there's heaps of information there as well if you are interested in finding out more. Yeah. And essentially board meetings as well is the main attendance requirement for this role. So yeah, you can see here it really is about decision making, and that is a mixture of internal decision making at USASA and also external decision making, which we say external when we meet the uni because they're external to us. You might see that at the moment as being internal still. But yes, there are some decision making things of the university that they do ask for board members to be a part of. And I also don't want this to be, I don't know, we'll get to the expectations about time and stuff shortly, but I don't want this to be turning anyone off at this point, because I think this is it's just good for you to understand, I suppose, what the role of what the reps are, and the depth and not even the depth, the breadth that you may encounter in what you do on the board. But yes, essentially the board's main role is good governance and financial stewardship. I probably should have had a slide that said financial stewardship, but my background is law, so I find this stuff more interesting. Good governance. You got to ask yourself, is this decision in the best interest of USASA, and does it further USASA's objectives? So again, that is what your mindset should be as a custodian of the board, as a decision maker, and as someone who has been elected by members to make decisions on behalf of an organisation. So that might be a lot to take in about what the role of a board is, what it is in the context of USASA. But now I'll tell you what it actually will mean for the successfully elected rep, and for those who are already on the board. So it is about 5 hours a week on average that you'll probably spend during USASA work, and that might include, like, pre-reading something before you attend a meeting, and that meeting then goes for an hour, or that kind of thing. There is absolutely no expectation that you will do every single thing on here. In fact, the only main thing that you will be required to actually attend every single month is, at a minimum, is the board meeting, and that usually goes for half an hour to 2 hours on the third Tuesday of every month at 6 p.m. So I can say that has been scheduled for the rest of the year. And that will be, yes, the third Tuesday of each month. I think December's won't be the third Tuesday. It'll probably be earlier in the month. But generally that's it. Again, if you want to put your hand up to be on any of the committees, that would also be included in that time. Some people choose to go do a lot of committees and some do less, but also some people have a lot less outside of uni commitments. And we really understand that people have, diverse personal circumstances as well, and that it may not be feasible for them to be on these committees or to do this extra stuff, particularly if they work or have families, may not be feasible. So basically the board meeting is the main thing. You will need to make a decision though, like, is this something I can do, knowing the time constraints? And that some hours and some weeks that 5 hours might be a little bit more, and some it might be a little bit less. So it really is an average there. Some other examples are the committee meetings, formal inquiries. That's an example of a university decision-making committee that they will ask for a USASA board member to be a student representative on. Various advisory groups and working groups that come around the uni. Usually you would only put your hand up for one of those things if you were very interested, particularly in the subject matter as well. No one will be forced to do that kind of work in areas that they're not, specifically interested in, because again, we do see this as educative and something that creates opportunities for you, I suppose, rather than wanting to create lots of burden. That's not the approach, I guess. And catch-ups with president or staff on projects, and that might include me or Noah or any of our other staff that help as well. You'll see on here the term of position. So this particular election for this position will only go until the end of this year. The 31st of December will be the final day of this board's term. If you did want to be on the board in 2022, we are going to have an election for the entire board, which will be all 15 board members, in usually about September. Technically, it hasn't been scheduled yet, the timeline, which is normal. We don't usually have a schedule at this time of the year yet, but convention says that it will usually be September, October, and it will definitely have voting opening in October. So if you were interested in being on the board beyond that, you would need to reapply for that position, even if you are elected. I just wanted to put that out there now. So the position will actually start no earlier than the 9th of July as well. And that is because we do need to have that completion of the election timeline process in order to have that. And that does include also you supplying a police check, which when we get to I'll go over the eligibility, you'll understand a bit more why that's so strict as a requirement. And we need a working with children check as well, actually. The police check can be a little bit annoying because sometimes you might have one for work, but if it's too out of date, we will ask that you do get a new one. However, that said, I don't want anyone to go out and get a police check for this election until they've been elected, because we will reimburse you, and I don't want anyone to go incur any personal expense related to this before they know for sure. Yeah. Also, if you do have one that's fairly recent, like within the last 3 months or so, that's probably acceptable. But, police checks are a snapshot in time. So that is why we do ask for recent versions. But yeah. Cool. So one of the things that we do have around board meetings attendance and why it is so important to be able to commit to that time is because there is a specific section in the USASA Constitution that governs attendance at meetings. So if you do not attend 2 consecutive meetings without having leave approved, which I'll get to in a second, or 2 or 3 out of 5 consecutive meetings, your position on the board will automatically be vacated. So the board doesn't actually have the power to unvacate you. It's just an automatic operation of what the section says. However, the board can approve leave if you do have a good reason for not attending. And the process for that around applying for leave is fairly simple. So as you can see, it's ordinary resolution of the board. What that means is just a simple majority vote in a board meeting. So the board often also has a practice of applying a 1 month's grace on retrospective. So if you find out on the day you can't go to that board meeting, you can apply for your leave the month after, and only will they consider it leave or leave without or absence without leave until a month later. So you're not, once you miss that second meeting, you're not just, it's not the last chance that you have. But it is really important that you do understand that that is one of the requirements. And it also does mean that it's created a culture where the board does take this quite seriously. Attendance at board meetings is taken pretty seriously. So that's just something to be aware of. However, board meetings can be done online. They can be attended via Zoom. And when I've got travel on here, there is no expectation that you must travel for this role, that you must come to Adelaide for board meetings. That's not the case. However, if you are in a position to do so and you would like to attend those meetings in person, we can arrange for that to happen, and we can fly you in from Australia. Obviously, you will all be Australian because this is an onshore role only. Only onshore students can apply for this. But yeah, so it's not an expectation or a requirement that you must travel, but it is certainly an option if that's something you would like to do. Yeah. So you'll see on there as well where I've got expected travel and I've crossed out board retreat. Now that is because that is an event that happens in January of each year. And ordinarily for board elections, there is a requirement that you must attend that in person unless you have leave approved. Usually a stricter criteria for board meetings of why you can't attend that. So you will notice if you do apply for the big like the full board election in September, that will be mentioned on the ballot. It's not for this one, but I still just wanted to flag that that's the only actual expectation of travel that we do tend to have for board reps, and it won't apply for this election or for this role, I should say. Cool. So yeah, I guess that seems like it might seem like a lot, and I guess that's because it is, but I want you to understand that, I guess, and have realistic expectations. You will get out what you put into this role though. So if you can only attend board meetings and you may not necessarily have the scope to do more than that, that's fine. That's not like in terms of, can I manage this? Will I be, contributing? Yes, you will be contributing. That's what you need to do. And that's it. But I just wanted to, also say, if you do want to do more, you will get more out of it. But again, that's your choice to make, I guess. I just want everyone to be aware of that, and I guess think all these things. I would hate for people to think it's either too, not necessarily that it's too much, because I think there's still scope to adapt to that. But I just want people to understand before they get into it. I don't want people to be disappointed or anything like that. But I do think it is worth it. You will get heaps out of it, and so on. And also, yeah. Oh, actually, I won't go further than that. I'll move on. Beautiful. All right. So the actual election process itself, as you know, nominations opened yesterday. Oh, no, sorry, Monday. What day are we? They open on Monday at 9 o'clock, and they will be open until Friday, the 4th of June at 4 p.m. So we have those open for 10 business days, but because of the weekend, there's a few extra days in there as well. And the process is just to follow the the nomination form link on that election page at the bottom that I've got hyperlinked there. And then fill out all the information on that form. You will have to upload a copy of either your ID card or a screenshot of your, what was it? I think it's enrollment summary, I think it's called. Like you can download it from Campus Central or the student portal that you have from inside that. Either or is fine. If you don't have a student ID card, upload that summary. But that's just to make sure that you are currently a student, because then we do check your provisional eligibility. So I say provisional eligibility because the police check that you will supply and the working with children check are additional parts of the eligibility that you verify afterwards. But what provisional eligibility means is that we make sure that you are in fact enrolled at UniSA Online and that you are in fact an onshore student and do meet the other criteria. So that's what nomination process will be. Feel free, like I would recommend having a look at the form before you submit it. It's really not that long this time. It's only like very, very brief, 10 questions. You just essentially check the boxes and make sure you read all the information though that you are correctly making a correct declaration that you'll find on the last one, because that does require you to, state that you are eligible and so forth, and that you will make truthful statements regarding the selection. So this is the full eligibility criteria, basically. So you must have a UniSA Online home campus. If you've enrolled through UniSA Online, you will know this, that it's you. If you are unsure whether you are enrolled through UniSA Online, there is a really good chance that you're not, because you would know if that was the way that you were enrolled. It's also really clear that this that you're also not just a UniSA Online student, but that it's your program that's fully enrolled, and that's why it must be your home campus. So if you're just doing a couple of courses, but through UniSA Online, but you're usually like based at McGill or City West, etc., you aren't a UniSA Online home campus student, unfortunately. And the reason that we are so strict on that is because, as you know, USASA's constitution says that our board is made up of campus representatives, and UniSA Online is specifically a campus for this purpose. So that is why. The student who will run for this board must also be an onshore student, which is a requirement that is stated in the USASA constitution as well. So I think there are a couple of people that have emailed us about this, and they may have been disappointed to hear that they're not eligible because they're based overseas. But unfortunately, we don't have any room to change that requirement. It's in the constitution, and so we are bound to follow it as people running the election. You must also have never been involuntarily been removed or vacated position on the board. I think it's unlikely that this will apply to anyone from UniSA Online because it is such a new part of the uni and a new addition to the board, but never say never in these kinds of things. But yeah, so essentially that means either removed for misconduct or vacated position was if you didn't attend 2 board meetings, that's an example of vacation from office. Again, unlikely, but you need to know that it's a requirement. You also are not eligible if you are a permanent or fixed term contract employee of USASA or UniSA. We will obviously be able to tell if you're an employee of USASA because there's only 13 of us and we all know each other. But if you are a staff member of the university and you're not sure whether you're permanent or fixed term or casual or what your arrangement is, feel free to send me an email just to check first. And we'll get that looked into, because I wouldn't want you to waste your time going through the election process and then finding out that you're actually not eligible. And I also don't want anyone to change their employment status for this election. That's a question I've had in the past, and I really don't know if that's I don't know. It's not something I would necessarily advocate for. So yeah, just let's have a chat about that if you think that might apply to you. The next one is never having been convicted of an indictable offence or an offence related to fraud and dishonesty. Again, this is something that is embedded in both legislation in South Australia that governs associations and also in USASA's constitution. So there's also no room to be lenient on any of these requirements as well. And it also does explain why we have the police check as a requirement for checking eligibility thereafter, because we do need to make sure that you do meet this criteria. And obviously the fraud and dishonesty aspect, you are, by running for this election, you are essentially putting yourself forward and saying, I'm a trustworthy person who is going to, have integrity and be the trustee of this association's funds for its members. That's basically what you're saying. So if you've been convicted of fraud or dishonesty or something like that, there's a good chance that maybe that's not necessarily the case, and that is why that is a requirement as well. The last one may make you scratch your head, which is to agree to comply with directions from the Commissioner in connection with any application for a liquor licence in South Australia. But again, I have to include that because it's in the Constitution, and the reason for is that USASA used to run a bar, and which means that, USASA, the legal entity applying for a liquor licence, all of the board of directors are the people who embody that entity and therefore have to meet those requirements. So yeah, hypothetical, we don't actually run a bar at the moment. We haven't applied for a liquor license in a long time, but again, you have to agree to comply. So one of the other criteria there. Great. So that's the eligibility requirements. The election is overseen by the person called the returning officer, and that is a title that's common across all elections. My role is assistant returning officer. So if you see in that bottom bullet point above the email address to assistant RO, that is me. And the way that this works is that Deborah is a person who is external to USASA. As you can see from the email, they work for a company called Third Sector Management, which is basically like non-profits. And Deborah is an accountant and an auditor is her background. And she's run the USASA election with me since I started at USASA in 2017. So I think this is our 10th election where we've worked together as RO and returning officer. So Deborah will be the person who makes all the decisions, and I'm the person who carries out the administration, essentially. So if you do email me with a question or something on a matter of interpretation, there's a very good chance that I will refer that to Deborah, either for her to answer or get her advice before I answer you back. So the reason that we do this is because obviously I am, I look after the board administration and support the board throughout the year. So I work with board members before, after, during elections, etc. So it just really makes the whole process a lot more transparent and better if we have an external person making the decisions. And that's really a process that works well for us, because Deborah has no stake in the outcome of the election. And I think that's a really good policy that USASA has, that we do that. So that's a bit of background there. And of course, if you ever do need to make a complaint against the decision of the returning officer, there is a process for that as well. We will explain more about that kind of stuff at the candidate briefing, which is something that all candidates will have to attend in the week following the closure of nominations. But yeah, that's more specific governance stuff. This is just general info tonight. Cool. So the voting procedure as well, when it happens, will be done 100% online. So all students who have a UniSA online home campus will receive a voting link. Again, this will only be those students who are enrolled at UniSA online for their entire program, because that is what determines whether it's their home campus. And they will be able to vote. Now, it's also, I should mention here that offshore students who are enrolled in UniSA online will be able to vote in the election. It's just the onshore status that it depends whether or not they can actually run. So you can definitely vote in the election, participate in the election that way if you are an offshore student. So the voting will be counted by optional, preferential, proportional representation, is what it says in the Constitution, which is basically the way that they count the vote in the Australian Senate, the lower house of this Parliament. And if you've ever voted in an Australian election, you'd know that if you want to number all the preferences below, you can. So it is optional as well. So that is the way this works. I will tell you, we very often, what was it, like the last election had like 72 candidates or something like that. There will not be that many boxes on the ballot form. I imagine there will be anywhere from 2 to 10. So, but I mean, I don't know. I haven't got the nominations in yet. It's just an estimate. But yeah. So it definitely won't be like that, but you can cast preferences when it comes time to vote. Cool. So here are some other important dates that are surrounding the election that we just want you to be aware of as well, because it's not just as simple administratively as submitting the nomination form. You are also required to attend one of those candidate briefings. I am also considering, yeah, actually, no, I'll come back to that afterwards. I won't just bring that up. I'll come back after. Yeah, so these compulsory candidate briefing sessions. Now, when you do submit your nomination form, you will select which one of these you would like to attend. Or if you do need to change, if you cannot meet either of these times, you can apply for an alternative. I would hope that people can try and make either of those 2 times, because the alternative time is at the discretion of the returning officer. But I do appreciate that people do have lives, and I do know that is week 10 of your term. So if you have an exam that night, for example, or you have an exam both those nights, maybe that's very good grounds for why you need an alternative session. But also, on the same token, you do also know that this is how far in advance for, it says an hour there. In reality, it'll probably go for 45 minutes. That hour's like a maximum amount of time. So do try and spare that 1 hour that night if you can, physically join the Zoom call. So you will also be required to upload a policy statement in that week as well. So a policy statement is something that is required from all candidates. And if you've read the election notice already, you'll know that it's a 200-word statement that talks about why you're running, who you are. It's basically what students will see before they go to vote. And they all get collated. A photograph and a policy statement of all candidates gets collated and published on the USASA website prior to voting opening, and that's what we call the broadsheet. If you've read the election regulations and you wondered what a broadsheet was, that is it. And that is also available for students to view at the time that they do cast their votes. So I believe in the electronic ballot that they will receive, there will be a link to that as well. So that's really your chance, I guess, to get your message out there and to try and get students to vote for you. When we have the compulsory candidate briefing session, Deb will go into a little bit more detail about what the actual, do's and don'ts of those things are, and what she will be looking for when she approves or does not approve or asks you to resubmit, I guess, those statements. And, that deadline we've set is to try and have that quick turnaround of doing that, because we also don't want you to overthink it, but it might be useful for you to be aware of it now. That is something you'll have to do. Those things at the top are real. Those first two points are really the things that are crucial to nominating itself. You'll see then that next one, online candidates forum. Now, what this is will be, and this is something that will be relevant to all students from UniSA Online, because students who are not running in the election will be invited to attend to ask the students who are running questions about why they're running. And that is, it'll essentially be like an online, I don't like to use the word debate because I think it's a bit adversarial, and it also doesn't really capture the point of the event, I guess, which is actually to help you folks be heard, because we do recognize that you are all quite, I guess, isolated physically from each other. It's the nature of an online degree, and you may never have met any of your classmates in person or have opportunities to speak to them. So we really want to help get your messages out there for when you do run for this election. So that will be facilitated by Tarosh Jacob, who's one of the staff at UniSA Online, and that will be, and Tarosh's role in that will be to make sure that everyone gets a chance to speak. I'm not sure of the format that he will run that in, but it will be your basic like a spiel about yourself, and then some questions that have been pre-prepared, and maybe some questions from the floor as well if people attend and are interested. Because I will also flag that you will not be allowed to campaign about the election in your Learn Online sites, because that is the equivalent of your classrooms, and the on-campus students are not allowed to campaign in classrooms. So that is a new addition to the election regulations for this election. And in fact, that will also now apply to all students across the uni, because they also use Learn Online. So in the future elections as well, it's just making that a bit clearer. So yeah, this will be the opportunity, I guess, to have your voice heard and get out there beyond that. If you do want to know more ways of campaigning, I think that might be something that you'll want to think about yourselves. As I'm sure you can understand, as returning officers in our roles, we don't give out advice on what's the best way to do that, because I think that would be inappropriate of us telling candidates how to campaign. But I will say that we do recognise that there should be ways to facilitate that in some ways, and that's what that forum will be. and then an online induction. Now that week on there is quite flexible. So particularly on whenever the outcome of the election is known, that can change. But I just wanted to let you know that if you are successful in this role, you're not just going to be thrown in the deep end. We will have an induction at some point online where we'll go through some of the nitty gritty, get you signed up on the systems and do all that kind of stuff and have you meet some of the staff and people that you'll be working with. So yeah, even though you did miss out on that retreat at the beginning of the year, that, we're not going to just leave you on your own. This is definitely going to be a guided introduction to USASA, and hopefully we'll make that nice and welcoming for you. So basically that's the election in a nutshell. It is a long process. It does go over many months. Partly again, we're bound by what's in the election regulations. But I think there's benefit in having a long period for it as well, because this is a real board of directors. This is like a real opportunity to have that leadership practice and stuff that you may not usually get to do at this stage in your careers. So yeah, we really do want to promote this as an educative experience as well. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask away.